Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. There are few things more infuriating than being lied to by your own government, the government you pay for, the one your ancestors risked their lives to protect. Has that happened to you? Of course it has. It enrages you. But if it happens again and again, if it happens often enough, if your government makes a habit of lying to you, then over time it becomes something else. Over time you realize you're not really living in a democracy. You can't be. Because in a democracy, the government has a moral and legal obligation to tell you the truth always, period. And that makes sense because in a democracy, you are not a subject or a mere consumer. You're a citizen. You are a shareholder in the system. You are an owner of it. The people who run your government are your employees. They're like your cleaning lady. You may appreciate the work they do. Good job. But the minute you catch them stealing your cufflinks, you fired them. Those are the rules because it's your house, not theirs. But what if the rules were inverted? What if you caught an employee stealing, but instead of seeming ashamed and penitent, he whipped around and attacked you, like you were the criminal? Well, that is the experience of watching White House spokesman John Kirby talk about the destruction of the Nord Stream pipelines. Anyone who imagines, who thinks for a moment the Biden administration was in any way involved with that sabotage, directly or indirectly, is not simply wrong. No, anyone who imagines that is a bad person, a tool of Vladimir Putin. Watch.
Did the U.S. or a proxy for the U.S. have anything to do with the explosion on the Nord Stream pipeline?
The United States had nothing to do with it. That's just Russian propaganda and disinformation. Now, we know it was an act of sabotage, but there's an investigation going on right now. I don't think we're going to get into credentialing that in terms of, who was responsible. We're going to let the investigators take a look at that. But clearly, this was an act of sabotage.
All right, so you can officially say that the U.S. was not involved in any way in this attack.
That's right. That's correct.
Not to belabor this, but for the people who look at this and say, why would Russia attack its own pipeline that creates leverage over Europe and perhaps the West, what do you say to them?
Again, I can't speak to specific accountability for this act of sabotage. I can just assure you the United States had nothing to do with it. Of course, that's just Russian propaganda.
So notice Brett Baer asked the question, did the U.S., did the Biden administration, or any of its proxies have anything to do with the sabotage? To which John Kirby says, we didn't do it, and then moves right to the point, which is anyone who says we did it is repeating Russian propaganda. That's what John Kirby said. It's disinformation from Quislings, more loyal to Vladimir Putin than their own country. That's the kind of thing that only truly bad people say. Okay, if the White House says so, obviously we have no choice but to believe it. But you still have to wonder, not everyone does believe that. Why? Where might some Americans have gotten the notion that the Biden administration might have been involved, directly or through a proxy, in the destruction of the Nord Stream pipelines? Why would they think that? They certainly didn't watch it on Russia Today. RT has been pulled off the air. They didn't hear it from Putin or any of his ministers. You can barely find anything from the Russian government on Google. And of course, any book sympathetic to Putin has been banned on Amazon. In fact, every piece of information that reflects the modern Russian point of view has been censored in the United States because this is a free country fighting for democracy. You just can't read what you want or think what you want. So actually, if you think about it, if Americans are deluded about what happened to the Nord Stream pipeline, the delusion didn't come from Moscow because there's no way for Moscow to get us disinformation to the United States because the U.S. government has blocked it along with the tech companies. So where did that idea come from? Why might they think that? Well, maybe they learned it from Joe Biden himself. He's the president. Here's Biden this winter on American television pledging to destroy the Nord Stream pipelines if Russia does something he doesn't want them to do. Watch.
If Russia invades, that means tanks or troops crossing the border of Ukraine again. Then there will be no longer a Nord Stream 2. We will bring an end to it.
How will you do that exactly? Since the project and control of the project is within Germany's control.
We will, I promise you, we'll be able to do it.
So that's about as clear as it gets. Biden doesn't say we will shut it down. He will say there will be no Nord Stream pipeline. We will put an end to it. And the reporter says, but wait a second. It's not your pipeline. How will you be able to do that? So he has a chance to reframe the question, to revise his answer, to be more precise, but he doesn't. He says flat out, I promise you, we'll be able to take out Nord Stream. Joe Biden, President of the United States. So there's that clue. And then, as if that wasn't enough, last Friday, the Secretary of State in the Biden administration, Mr. Tony Blinken, bragged about how great the sabotage of Nord Stream was. And we're quoting, "It's a tremendous opportunity," said Tony Blinken. It's a great thing, not a tragedy, a victory, something we're in favor of. We're excited about it. Destroyed a natural gas pipeline. We're for that. So that might be another clue that the Biden administration may have had something to do with it. Oh, but no, says the White House. Despite the fact that we promised we would do it, and then we crowed about how great it was after it happened, we had nothing at all to do with it. Who did it? Well, Russia did it. They blew up their own pipeline, making their own country poorer and weaker in the middle of a major war, because that's how crazy, but also diabolically effective, the Russians are. Suicidal, yet brilliant. And if you don't buy that story uncritically, if you have any questions about how exactly that might work, you're a disloyal American. Shut up. Here's Chris Stewart, a Republican member of Congress from Utah, making the very same point.
John Kirby with the National Security Council was on earlier, in no uncertain terms said the U.S. was not behind, and a proxy of the U.S. was not behind the explosion on the Nord Stream pipeline. From your perspective, both of you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. This is the last thing that we want, to raise gas prices further in Europe. It's pretty obvious this is a Russian sabotage operation.
And for the people, Congressman Stewart, that say, why would Russia do that on its own pipeline? What do you say?
Well, then people who are suggesting the U.S., that is exactly what Vladimir Putin wants.
It's just so great. I mean, it's perfectly bipartisan. Here you have a Republican from Utah, Chris Stewart, and a Democrat from Massachusetts, Seth Moulton, agreeing precisely. It's exactly what Vladimir Putin wants. He wants you to blame the Biden administration for something he did. That's the bipartisan view in Washington. What's interesting is they don't really know that. They have no evidence that that's true. Briefers from the intel agencies have, as of this afternoon, told members of Congress they have no idea who committed industrial terrorism against these pipelines. Now, that itself is a lie, of course. The CIA has no idea at all? Right. They have no idea. But as far as members of Congress, Chris Stewart and Seth Moulton know, there's no evidence either way. They have no facts. That is a fact. They have no facts. So, again, as a factual matter, neither of those guys nor any member of Congress, no matter what committee they sit on, has any idea who did this. But if you suggest the obvious, Russia probably didn't do it, because why would they do it? It's against their own interest, no matter what dumb story you're trying to sell us. If you suggest that, if you apply common sense, you're evil. And then they go farther and say things that are like completely implausible. Seth Moulton, we're quoting, "The last thing we want is to raise gas prices in Europe." Really, Seth Moulton? Is that true? Because isn't the Biden administration philosophically opposed to low gas prices? Aren't they opposed to all fossil fuels? Oh, right, they are. How do we know that? Is that Russian propaganda? No, because we can't read Russian propaganda because it's been banned in favor of our propaganda. We know that because Joe Biden himself has said so many times on television. Okay, so maybe there is a motive here. Maybe there's more than one motive. But don't ask, because, warn the media, asking obvious questions is forbidden. Watch.
Fox News host Tucker Carlson irresponsibly claiming the United States was responsible for the leak.
Other than Putin and Tucker Carlson, it seems pretty clear that everyone knows that Putin did this himself.
And Tucker Carlson, this past week, actually once again directly repeated Russian propaganda, suggesting it was somehow the United States behind the attack on the Nord Stream pipeline. How real is that movement? Is it growing?
It's Russian propaganda! How dare they? Really? Is it really? Probably, just thought experiment here, a lot of Americans who don't feel any allegiance whatsoever to Russia don't like Putin. Why would you if you're an American? But